Hey folks, first of all, welcome home. Thanks everybody for coming out. It's good to be in person again. It really is. I guess we haven't done this since 2019, so it feels really good to be back in person and to such a full room. I honestly wasn't sure how many we'd get out for this, given the weather and the Phillies and the fact that it's been so long. I just don't know how many people are actually still at work to come to an after-work event. Because so much has changed since we were last here. So I really can't thank you all for coming out to Philly Python Users Group and DataPhilly. We've got two great speakers coming up. The second one is on his way here, but 76 is 76ing, and there is currently a car accident on it. So he should be here by the time Dawn is done giving her presentation. So Dawn's presentation is how to supercharge your Python development environment with VS Code. And the second speaker, Paul Chan, who's on his way, is XGBoost wage prediction model based on 2021 immigration data. So we've got two really good presentations for you tonight. And as you can see on the agenda, we've already had pizza. We're going to have some introductions from the different groups here. And then we'll do the two talks, the O'Reilly raffle, where we're still trying to figure out where all the O'Reilly swag is, as well as some bonus swag here from my good friend Dane. And then stick around to do some networking at the end if you want. And for those of you who just came in, I'll get you some raffle tickets in just a minute. But we may need to do IOUs for the O'Reilly books, but we'll get them to you somehow. So first and foremost, I want to thank our sponsors. This always feels a little redundant. I am the principal engineer at Wharton Research Data Services, and they are our lead sponsor for providing the space, the security, the housekeeping, and the pizza. Wharton Research Data Services is a leading academic platform that's built right here in Philadelphia in our own school. We have about a 4 petabyte data footprint. Most of that is every bid, trade, and quote on the New York Stock Exchange. And most of the academic financial research in the world happens on our platform. So I do take a sick pleasure knowing these sort of fly-by-night business schools you might have heard of. Probably not, though. They're sort of second tier, like Harvard, Stanford, MIT. They all have to come to my Wharton website to do their homework. It's really kind of a good feeling that way. I also really want to thank O'Reilly, who did send out some swag, book, and apparel for giveaways. I think 4 books and 3 pairs of socks will be raffled off later. Wow. So we may just have to get you we may have to give an IOU. And also thank you to Dave for bringing out a couple books, which we'll give away a little bit later. And you might even be able to get him to autograph them for you. How about that? So O'Reilly is, for those of you who don't know, O'Reilly is sort of one of the leading publishers and learning platforms for all things technology. So it's really great having them sponsor again. So a little bit more about the Philly Python Users Group for those of you who don't need here. First off, I want to call, there are a bunch of organizers and organizers emeritus here. I want to thank everyone. If you could all just stand up for a moment and wave and say hi, it would be great. We've got Manisha there, who's our fearless leader and trailblazer. Sam Williams, Jeremy Lowe, Dawn over here. It's wonderful to have everyone back. It's good to get things rolling again. We used to have project nights. We're talking about maybe starting up project nights again, but we wanted to see how this one goes before we dive back in. We're a diverse, friendly group of Pythonistas, all from the Philadelphia area. As you've probably seen on our meetup, we have over 3,000 members total. And we're hoping to, again, regularly host presentations, project nights, and maybe even start up our winter holiday party again. To that end, we're going to meet again up next month, April 27th, the last Thursday of our month in our traditional slot. So if you win the O'Reilly stuff tonight, come next month, and hopefully by then we'll have tracked it down for you. O'Reilly's getting a lot of mileage. I've seen their names a lot of times. Also, Philly Tech Week is the week of Tuesday, May 10th, and I say that because Tuesday, May 10th is the technically Philly Tech Week Developers Conference. And that night they are talking about doing a sort of, they used to do a super meetup in the summer, where it would be a meetup of all the local technology meetup groups, including Philly Python Users Group, our friends in Philly RB, Philly Postgres, New Technology Meetup, DataPhilly, all these different groups have come together for a big super meetup. They're talking about doing that in the evening. This has just been announced, the Tuesday of Philly Tech Week. So we may get involved with that. So keep your eyes peeled for that as well in May. It'll be a great week to come together in sort of a more social context. And if you're looking for a job, there'll be lots of recruiters. And if you're not looking for a job, you can play the hide from the recruiters game that I like to play. So if you're interested in joining us, feel free to go to meetup.com/PhillyPug for all of you DataPhillies who are here. And vice versa, for any of you PhillyPuggers who aren't on DataPhilly, I can highly recommend it. I'm a member of both groups. So DataPhilly is a community-run meetup group that's been in existence since 2013. I believe the original organizers actually met at Philly Pug, which is a little nice piece of trivia. They have over 5,200 members, so they have lapped us on the amount of members in the group. Data science practitioners and enthusiasts. They're trying to get back to having monthly speaker events as well and focus on bringing sort of the latest technologies and models in data science to all the presentations. They also have hand-on workshops on various topics from beginner to advanced levels, lots of networking opportunities, and job postings on their Slack channel. So there is a Slack channel for DataPhilly as well, which is just dataphilly.slack.com. A lot of us from the Philly Python Users Group hang out in the Philly Dev Slack, which is a very active Slack, which I think if you go to phillydev.org maybe, you can find out how to join there. You have to get somebody who's on there to invite you, but it's pretty straightforward. Don, Dane, and I are always on there with alarming regularity. So if anybody's interested on getting the Philly Dev Slack, feel free to hit any of us up. There's also a very, very active jobs board on there if you're looking for work. DataPhilly also offers a resume review service. So this is actually pretty cool. If you're looking to have your resume reviewed and you're in the field of data science, you can email admin@dataphilly.com. And so far this year, they've already gotten 9 submissions and done sort of a group review of those resumes and given tips on them to help people get jobs in data science. Both groups are always looking for speakers. So, it tends to be easy to sort of recycle the same speakers over and over. Most people are probably pretty sick of hearing my voice. So I encourage you, if you'd like to speak on a topic, or want to talk about something cool that you're thinking of working on, or you have an idea for presentations, please feel free to hit any of us up. My email is probably what you would guess it would be, which is tim@pyphilly.org. That's pyphilly.org. So feel free to hit me up with any ideas, thoughts you have. It might be fun one of these days to finally do a lightning talks night where we have a bunch of 5 to 10 minute talks. So everybody, people new and people who haven't given presentations before, can kind of dip their toe in the pool and see if it's something for them. I know that's how a lot of us got started, was with lightning talks. So it's a lot of fun. So that's all I had, unless anybody else had anything they wanted to chime in on. And at the end, if there's some extra time left over, maybe we'll make a little time for people to talk about projects they're working on. Any announcements from the community? All right then. So without further ado then, I'm going to turn it over to Dawn Wages, my dear friend who is now working at Microsoft since she ditched us here at Wharton.
I know, I feel bad. I miss all of y'all so much.
Thanks, Dawn. Please help me welcome Dawn Wages.
It was kind of funny because I heard the intro to the Python Pulse going, and I was like, oh, my show started. So for anyone who missed it, and what was up is there's a live stream second Friday of every month. It is 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time, 7 p.m. UTC, and it's just an hour where we chat with Pythonistas. We do talk about Microsoft products, but we are still very Python focused, and I'm not trying to sell you a drawer. So it's fun. We've had a couple of really cool episodes with some really, really cool people, and we plan on having a lot more. So one of the things that I'm going to be talking about today is VS Code and dev containers. So I'm going to do a poll in the audience for just what your knowledge level is on dev containers and what you're working on. So developers, can you raise your hand? Engineers, tech leads, architects. So we get a good number. What about like data professionals, data scientists maybe? Okay, cool. Relevant to all of you, we have like a lot of extensions in VS Code that suit those needs. So what editors are you all using? You can shout it out. Like, are you? Okay. VS Code. Jupyter Notebooks. I heard Jupyter Notebooks. Spider. Okay. PyCharm. I heard PyCharm.
VS Code.
VS Code. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm not trying to sell you all on VS Code. Okay. The efficient one over here. Let's all do your developer experience. I love that.
And dark mode.
I'm not trying to sell anybody off on VS Code per se. I admittedly, all the way up until I started working at Microsoft, switched between PyCharm and VS Code, and they kind of made me a believer. So if you see like genuine excitement, I'm not a really great actress. I really like VS Code. We're going to talk about some workflows, and even if you're not interested in VS Code, this does help some ideas on contextualizing why some people really choose to put all of their projects in Docker. I never did that. I always was local unless I was trying to share projects from one place to another, or I was lifted and shifted into the cloud and it was put in Docker. So a little bit more about me, probably want to know who I am. I go by Bajoran Engineer on the internet. I do like Star Trek, DS9 rocks. I should have worn my earring today, but I didn't. I am a Python community advocate at Microsoft. This is like a new role for me. I am traditionally engineer. I've been an engineer for a couple of years. They put me in front of a camera. I am constantly awkward, but I'm rolling through it because I think I run off of charm. I am the treasurer for the Python Software Foundation. That is also pretty new for me. I started that in May of 2021. So if you want to talk more about getting involved in the boring non-code machinations of the open source community, I do event organizing in DjangoCons as well. I'm sponsor chair for DjangoCon US. That'll be in Durham this year. It's really excited. That's my home turf. I am also speaking at DjangoCon Europe, and I'm a sponsor chair for DjangoCon Africa. So if you want an excuse to go to Tanzania, that's a good one. That's in November. I don't know if I'll be there in person. We're really hoping the budget will get me there. I don't know. Send an email to my boss saying I'm great and I should go to Tanzania. I'm a former Wharton employee, so I used to be a developer on the Wharton computing, and I worked with Yemi, and I saw Tim all the time, and we worked with research faculty and spun up a lot of small Django projects to suit all of their research needs. So another consultative job, and I was a freelance consultant for a few years before that too. Sometimes I stream. I'm really inconsistent streaming for myself. Sorry about that. I'm going to get good at it. But I am pretty consistently streaming for Microsoft every second Friday on the Python Pulse. That was my really cringeworthy art. I'm trying to brand myself. I don't know how to brand myself. But anyway, that's what we're doing. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to be talking about dev containers. I'll ask a few questions. I'd love to keep it interactive, so if you want to interrupt me with a hand raise, I'm literally fine closing the presentation and just opening up VS Code. So most of it is recorded audio, like demos in there to show me clicking around. I did that earlier today, and it is mostly just to, if there's like internet connection or a fire or something, I don't know. So we can definitely go through the presentation, and when I did my dry run, it was about like 45 minutes, but I also ramble as you're seeing, so we'll see how fast we can get through it. But I love questions and I want to keep it interactive. So can we start with understanding, asking who has experience with Docker? Hand raise, lots of Docker people. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, so I'm going to zoom through some of the Docker slides, but there's some primer here too. Who's familiar with dev containers themselves? Have they heard of them as a product? Very cool, yes. Okay, this is my OKRs. I'm gonna tell my boss nobody knew. This is great. So essentially, dev containers are just Docker instances. You can create them in VS Code. It is an open spec. So like there are talks of PyCharm adopting dev containers as well. So truly what we're doing now is we are wrapping up your editor in a development environment, and you are now having two Docker instances. They can relate to each other. They can be in the same project. They can use two different Docker composes next to each other, and you will specify that in your Docker file. I'm getting a little bit deep, but we're going to go back over it. I'm going to mention it a couple times, but it's just Docker, and it also has your editor in there. It also has all of your extensions for VS Code in there. It also has all of the environment, variable, all of the things that you need. It wraps it up very neatly, and it lets you handle a move over from one person to another, so you can eliminate the picnic problem, the problem in chair, not in computer. You can hand that over, and someone else has the exact same development experience as you do. So this is a little bit redundant, but yes, we're using Docker Container as a full-featured development environment. So one of the problems of an application failing to run correctly when moved from that environment to another, it's just like using virtual environments. It does replace the need for virtual environments, but sometimes there's, like, if you're using Azure Functions or some type of tutorial, if you want a virtual environment inside your Docker container, you can do it. It's a turducken of environments. I love the word turducken. I've been saying it a lot lately because we've been putting virtual environments inside my Docker container. I try to steer away from that, so any of the example code that you see on my repos will typically not have that unless I'm using Azure Functions. But that's not this talk, that's another talk. Let's see if I'm covering all the things. Yeah, works on Mac, Linux, Windows, and it also removes the need for me to go and develop on my Windows because I have a dev container with Linux, which is what I usually use. One Microsoft, we're friends with Linux now. We're changing ties, we're good. Cool, so we specifically suggest this approach for teachers, quick ramp ups on new projects. So if you're consulting and freelancing, dev containers are really nice. New developers to a team, or if you want to do a quick open source PR and you don't want to go through all of the effort. So that's a typical pattern I've seen before dev containers came to be. We had Docker and Vagrant setups for quick development, quick ramp up. So I'm a core team member of Wagtail along with Tim, and so we have both Vagrant and Docker on that. And who, can I get a hand raised? Have you heard of code spaces? Yeah, a couple, okay. GitHub is better at marketing. So Codespaces is actually just uses dev container and VS Code all in Codespaces. And the difference is, and I'll just say that now since so many people raised their hand, the difference is that you don't need Docker desktop on your local machine to use Codespaces. It is all in the cloud. It is all someone else's machine. But you are also taxed on the amount of time you're using Codespaces. So this is an opportunity to do a very similar experience, but locally. Well, not locally, but you know, on your machine here, not there. All right. All right, so quick primer. A container is a self-contained unit where application code is packaged with its libraries, dependencies, runtime, and system tools. An image is that container, but it is not executed yet. It is an executable. And then a registry are a list of images that you can access. So you want to get some primers in there. So in this dev container, all of your files are mounted. You don't notice it. The DX is really slick like that. You just kind of open it up and it's just there. But when you're navigating out to another file, it prompts you. It says, would you like to look outside your container or inside your container? But it's all easily mounted. It's just like using WSL. There's also WSL extensions, so you don't have to stop using WSL if you want to use dev containers. Your editor's inside of there. That's really cool. It looks like a regular editor. It's just VS Code, but it is all in the dev container, so you can specify the color of your editor, and you can, yes?
Real newbie question.
Sure.
What's WSL?
WSL is Windows Subsystem for Linux. So it's an opportunity for you to have, and it's more on WSL 2 now. I don't know if there's going to be a 3, but it's an opportunity for you to have an entire Linux terminal kernel in your Windows machine. And they mount your files. It was a little finicky when I was trying to work on it, but you do have to like mount your files and do that actual extra mental load to do that, and they handle it all for you in VS Code. So yeah, there's a robust extension marketplace. That's one of the benefits of VS Code. It is supposed to be a lightweight code editor that you can supercharge into an IDE. And then there's ports that are exposed. And so like maybe that was one of your first thoughts that was one of my first thoughts is like, okay, so how do I access it? How do I QA? What do I do? How can I share it? They expose ports for you, and there's extra cool little features for you to do that. And there's multiple ports, and you can also pick an environment that will set it up for you really easy. So starting from 0, You want to install Docker and configure it for your operating system. This means you would have Docker desktop and it is running on your machine. So really all of the containers that are spun up is really just Docker desktop. You're gonna have it running on your machine the whole time. You're also gonna install VS Code. That is if you would like to go on this journey with me. The rest of it is going to be in VS Code, but I will mention other things and other technologies. And then you're going to want to get the Docker, the dev containers extension. So there's two different extensions you can use. The one on the left is dev containers. That is just what we're really going to be talking about today. But there's remote development, which is easily confused with the other extension. And that has like a lot of other things that you can do. You can SSH into another machine. You could do this. You can do that. There's some WSL one. We're not talking about that today. But it is a list of extensions that will automatically have you doing a lot of other things. Let's see, let's make sure I'm covering everything. Yeah, I think we're good. So when you start, it is just a .devcontainer directory with devcontainer.json in there, or just devcontainer.json. It is all JSON. What it is doing, it is removing and obscuring all of the Docker language, scripting language that you need. Is all in JSON. And we have templates, and then you can also go through the GUI to click, 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 and it will give you out a template. Sometimes you can copy, sometimes you can create. If you copy from an existing repo, one of mine, I'll give you a link. I have some coworkers who some really great repos. It does give you more and share more features that are just mostly in the documentation and you may not realize are super handy. So I'll show you some of those cool things too that don't actually get spit out with the template. But this is just an example of mine. So let's see if this video. So we're creating a dev container here. Let's make sure it's going through. All right, so I'm navigating over to the top. I'm opening a file. I think this one, I'm starting with Wagtail. So I'm starting with an open source project. This one's gonna be a little bit different. I use this as an example because you're gonna wanna pick an environment that has all the bells and whistles you need. And so this is gonna be really pared down. It's gonna be just Python 3. So I go to the bottom left-hand corner. You could see, I'll pause it for a second. But in the bottom left-hand corner, there is this little icon. That is one of the icons you can go to open up the dev container, and it starts this experience. So it opens up what we call the command palette in the middle. It asks you what you wanted to start. And now it shows, like, so this isn't like, it's just a development environment. You can have Node in there. You can have all sorts of things in there. You can polyglot as much as you want. You can get crazy. I stick to Python in here. So I searched for Python 3, and there's also Python with Postgres underneath. I'm going to go on that in the next scenario. I don't get anything else on there. I'm just like searching to see if there's any other extensions. I'm like looking around. Maybe Circle CI, CI has something. They don't. There's GitHub CLI, so I've added that to the environment. I'm just like looking around, and that's one of the ways that I also find the coolest extensions as well in the marketplace. Is just, is this a tool that you're using? Let's type it in the search bar. Don't have NVM. There is some Node and Wagtail, so that's one of the reasons why you're seeing some of the JavaScript requirements as well. There's Flake 8, but I didn't see it. I just wanted to see if there was a style linter. Cool. Let's fast forward a little bit. And that's essentially it. Fast forwarding to the end. That's essentially it. That's essentially it. Cool. All right, and so then you get this page. It will on the top left you see a .devcontainer directory, and then you also see devcontainer.json in there. This simple environment, all you need is the JSON file. This is what it spits out. It specifies the image. This is a Microsoft image for you. And then it has in features those two GitHub CLIs that I added. And then the bottom right hand, it says, would you like to reopen this in a dev container? I'm going to say yes. and it's creating. So I don't know if you can tell how fast it's moving. I sped this up. It does take a minute to spin up a dev container. It just does. It's a Docker. It takes a while for the first one, but it caches it, and then the next and following instances are a lot faster. I opened up the logs to make it a little bit prettier and more interesting. And we're just going. And now it's open, and you can tell it's open. It is not open. She wants to be fickle today. There we go. Nope. This is not a good experience for scrubbing a video. I did not realize that. Let's see.
So that means that's still not the image. It's something that we need to build.
Yes, it is building the image right now, so that's what we're watching. A little bit more entertaining.
Yeah,
page
when I
running.
see that something like it's compiling, so yeah, building things.
Shouldn't that be Etsy shadow instead of Etsy password?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. Maybe. No, I don't think so. Cool. So it's building, it's done, and you can tell that it's done because in the bottom right-hand corner, it'll have the open dev container, and it'll say in the bottom left, the name of the dev container. Cool. So what we did was we used the GUI, we pressed a few buttons, and it created a new dev container JSON. And this is the image of the dev container JSON that we just created. Using Python 3 and Postgres as the default container is going to be the next experience. And so as I mentioned, bottom left hand, you can see it says dev container when I scroll away. So in this example, I'm stopping the container. I say reopen locally, so it is the same file. We just unmount the files, we're opening it. It still has the devcontainer.json, and then I just deleted it because I just want to start over. Now I'm going through a different selection in that drop-down menu, and so instead of doing add container files, I'm saying, instead of saying create a new dev container, I added a create dev container file. And I'm creating a Python one. And so what this is going to do is it's going to have something completely empty. It says just create a new dev container. It will not mount your files. It's just a playground now. Cool, and that's all it is. It's super empty on the other side because there's nothing added.
Can I clarify what happened in the first thing you showed?
Sure.
So you started, there was no Docker container.
Yes.
You cloned a project. Then
Yes.
you said create a dev container, and it
Yes.
pushed all those project files into a newly created container.
Yes, it mounts it. Still on your local machine. It just is duplicated. It's technically duplicated into your dev container.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's. I don't know. I don't know if it's symlinked or exactly the mechanics of it moving back, but it is mounted on, and you can edit the files, and it will be completely the same between your local and your development environment. Cool. Great question. Thank you. Please ask more questions. It's really more entertaining when we have questions. Or you can copy, as I mentioned. So here are some examples of places that you can copy. Dev container template starter is really like a great place to do it. Those are like the official examples. You also have dev containers at GitHub, which is where the open spec and documentation is. Pamela Fox is an amazing person. I don't know if you are familiar with her, but she's been an educator for a long time. She worked for Khan Academy. She was a professor at Berkeley, and she is one of my coworkers, and I'm lucky to say. And she has a really great demos for things beyond dev containers as well, but I would point to her Django quiz app. And then the one that I'll be talking about more is through, it's called Wagtail Indie Meet, Django Not Space. So I'm working with a couple of friends in the Django community to have an open peer mentorship contributor circle for Django. So if you're familiar with Rachel Calhoun or Sarah Abdermain, we're working to, and we were supposed to do spring 2023, but it didn't work out that way. We're gathering the site, and all it really is it's very lo-fi group of peer mentorship to try to bring diverse groups of candidates to open source contributions, specifically in Django, because we're all very passionate about Django. So this is mine. We're adding, in this example, we're adding extensions to the dev container. So in this example, you can see right here, this is the code to add extensions. So we have under customizations, under that we have VS Code, and then we have extensions. And I'll show you how we end up adding some of these extensions. So I went to the application panel on the left side. I opened up the applications. Now I start searching for extensions. If y'all, I don't know if you're familiar with Ruff. It is one of the new fancy fast yeah. So I'm really excited to try Ruff out. I'm adding it so I can either copy the extension ID or I can just click the button to add it directly to your dev container, and it does. And then I open that back up, and Charlie R. Marsh's Ruff is there. One of the cool things about Ruff is that is a community contributed extension. We do not maintain it at Microsoft, and so if you're typically going to build an extension, you're going to be writing a lot of TypeScript, but we have created a template for Pythonistas with our language server protocol to interact with VS Code, and so you can write more Python when you're creating an extension for VS Code, which is really helpful because I do not like TypeScript. So here's some things that may show up in my settings file, settings.json, excuse me, in my, sorry, this is incorrect, actually. The top of the page should say devcontainer.json, sorry. But these are some things that show up in my dev containers that would not be put output in the template from the GUI. So I like having a separate Docker Compose for my production and my development. You can do that. I also like to specify to VS Code and Docker to shut down my Docker when I leave, because that's important. I like my battery. So that's a cool little handy function as well. Here's a Docker Compose YAML that I had. So you start with Docker Compose, then you can see on here, hopefully on line 7, it is pointing to my Docker file. So you start with the devcontainer.json, then it points to your Docker file, and then that can point to your devcontainer.json Docker Compose Docker file. It's up here. I'm not saying it right, but it's up here. Yeah, so then you can point to your Docker Compose, and then this is pointing to your Docker file. And really, there's not much in my Docker file. So this is just an opportunity. All of your Docker knowledge transfers over, and you can write in whichever file and fashion and pattern that suits you and makes you feel comfortable. Some more settings. I like making sure my ports are noisy when I want them to be, and quiet when I don't want them to be. So I use for people who are familiar with Django, when you do Python manage PY run server, it's usually on port 8000, that's convention, and that one is going to be noisy. And then I have my Postgres port 5432 quiet. And then I also have post create commands, very common in a lot of these orchestration tools, and I have it installing my dev requirements in this line, in this example.
So does this support conda?
Yes, it does. So one of the things that you can do in that dropdown is conda environment. Yeah, absolutely. So here's some of my favorite extensions. Here's an extension pack. This Don Germain is a Microsoft work employee, and he just like is prolific with his extension. So this is not officially Microsoft supported, but it kind of is, and I recommend everyone using it. So if you're using VS Code, this is a really cool pack to get. And it includes all of these. It has Jinja and the Python Environment Manager is actually really cool outside of Docker because it tracks all of the environments that you have on your machine, and then it gives you a little visual GUI on the left side to track your environments and open them up. So I like that one a lot too. That's really nice. So we also have Ruff, which is a really great one. Data Wrangler is new. I would love for you all, whoever is using VS Code and working in data, please try out Data Wrangler and personally tell me if you like it. Everyone's been very, very excited about our previews and our announcements. We should get the product manager on the Python Pulse in May to talk about it. But what it basically does is you're able to sort through and find outliers in data through visual GUI on VS Code. It is very cool. You can like limit the data set, and you can, and I'm a data dabbler, but I'm a little intimidated with my data knowledge. So data people, please tell me how much you like it and how useful it is. It's really, really cool. So that's new. SQL tools, if we have time, I can open up my machine and show you my Postgres. It is going to be empty, but I could click around and show you how SQL tools use. It uses very similar GUI to the Data Wrangler, where you're opening and it shows you just like a matrix of data, and then you can click through, and it very easily corresponds to your tables and rows in your data. You can see what's actually in there in your development environment. And so SQL Tools needs a driver. So this is the Postgres / Cockroach driver. So you'll need that, and that's why I put it on there too. And then the Jupyter extension gets really rave reviews. If you wanted to watch another episode of the Python Pulse, shameless plugs, but we got the product manager and Sarah Kaiser, Dr. Sarah Kaiser, who's like really just brilliant, like I work with such cool people, who is a professor or who used to teach, and then also is an expert in kind of like AI consultancy and things like that in a very practical, pragmatic way. There are no ghosts in the machine. It is, garbage in, garbage out, kind of very pragmatic approach. And we have an episode on Python Pulse about that too. So one of the most important parts of dev containers, and one of the like really big selling points, is that you can share your settings. And there are so many different ways of being able to do any one thing in VS Code. It is honestly pretty daunting trying to be able to talk about it as it's my job. So really, like, the name of the game is there's like 5 ways to do any one thing. So you have your workplace settings, you have your user settings, you have profile settings, and you have a dev container. Those are the main ones. And they are hierarchical, so they'll override in certain ways when they're not explicitly stated, and they will, when they are both explicitly stated, then it will override and to be able to make you sync up with your teammates. And so knowing where each of those 4 different places are is important, because you'll be like, why did it do that? You can check one of those 4 different places to see why it set your VS Code to purple and pink, because your teammates set it up that way. So I recommend you commit your devcontainer.json or your dev container directory. You also would want to commit your .vs code directory, because that is where your workplace settings go. This is getting a little bit in the weeds, but it just helps people kind of figure out what's going where. You would also can open things in code spaces, as I mentioned, so it's just basically a dev container, but not on your machine. You are renting that for free for a nominal, for a little amount, and then they make you pay after that. So, you can, in code spaces, very cool feature. So I showed you, have a screenshot. Ports are important. They expose and forward your ports. You can use, for example, like ngrok or something like that is an example of a service where you can use your machine. It is running the thing. It gives you a temporary URL, and you can share it to someone while you're working on it. It does that in code spaces, which is really cool. It does not do that in dev containers on your machine locally, though. There's also a live share extension. I think that's really cool for pair programming. So it opens up, it's vscode.dev. That is another way you can access VS Code. It is literally just VS Code in the browser. It's like, I don't know if people use Cloud9 before from Amazon before, like I was using that way back. We're catching up, we're getting some things. And so vscode.dev is basically VS Code in the browser. And you can do live share. So when you send someone a link, they can actually edit the code and make changes, and it will reflect on your machine at the same time. It is really great for pair programming and one of the many collaborative tools. Hey, friend.
Does the live share extension use the internet, or can it work over a local LAN?
It has to use the internet. It's through your browser. Yes, it is through your browser. I do believe there are options with remote connection. I don't know through LAN. Like where there's a will, there's a way. But yeah, it would be, if there was an option, it would be in that extension that I mentioned. There's the dev containers extension, and then there's the one that has the suite of tools for remote connection. It would be in there. But good question.
You could just set up a local server and give it an address.
It's true.
You could also sit next to each other.
There are plenty.
And you can also export your profile. So one of the other things that I mentioned, and I talk about profiles a little bit more. In profiles, contextually, when I'm like just grokking what I put where, profiles I usually use so when I'm streaming and I need my font bigger, or I want to differentiate from one type of project to another, so I use the color wheel to do that. This project makes me happy and make it a pretty color, and this project makes me really sad, and I keep it in black and gray. So I'll use profiles for different things like that. It will save the zoom of your font as well. Just very, very interesting, minute ways that you're just like, okay, I didn't know it would keep track of that, and it does. So this is me opening code spaces. So this is just the project that I was using. It's a Django project with Postgres in there. You go to code, you open in code spaces. I am fast forwarding, I believe, through this. Yeah, this is not real time. But it is much faster than setting up a dev container locally. But it is just Docker in the cloud. And it's setting up the code space. It's doing a thing.
So sorry, how did you get there? You opened a particular file?
Yeah, so I went to GitHub, and then there is a green button at the top of your, like right above where your directory structure is, above the README, above the directory structure, and it'll say, like open your code or something like that, and there's a drop-down menu, and one of the options is create a code space. And I'll go back to it again, so this is not the last time we're looking at it, and I'll make sure to point out where the green button is. This might actually be real time. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes to open. And there we go. We have VS Code in the browser, and it takes a little more time to open up your files and install the extensions. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is real time. I didn't speed this up. Here she goes. So CodeSpaces is cool because we're turducketing. You get 60 CodeSpace hours free every month. And you can make it on any project, and it does not have to specify a dev container in it beforehand. You could just create it off on the fly, and it'll try to read, and it'll tell you, like, I think there's Node, let me try to use Node in here. But when you have dev container, it will automatically read and then tell you that. there is a bug that I will be filing. I want to be honest and transparent. We're not all powerful and amazing. I did not see my post create command actually work, so it did not install my requirement. So I had to do that on the console app myself. So I'm gonna file an issue. And cool thing is, I file issues in the same place y'all file issues. We do this all out in the open. I love VS Code. It's the best team. They really gave me a really great graphic here. So that was opening a repo in Codespaces. Let me show you where it is. So yeah, so that's where the code is, and then I'll show it again real quick. Cool. So when it's running, these are comparing the ports. The top is Codespaces in the browser. What you would do is you would change the visibility from private to public, and then you can copy this link and send it to someone, and that is doing that in-Grok tool. What's up, Brian?
Yeah, I was just wondering, does Codespaces allow the same kind of collaborative editing as the...
Yes, yes. It's the same extensions as VS Code, so what you would do is you would download, install the live share extension there as well. And it was really cool. So we talked about dev containers at PyCascades. One of my coworkers, Sarah, that I already talked amazingly about before, she was there IRL, and like the whole sprint, she just kind of did this informal office hours workshop of getting a whole bunch of people's open source projects in dev containers. So that was really fun, and I hope to do something similar to that at DjangoCon Europe. This is VS Code profiles. So what I'm doing is I am going to the bottom left-hand corner. I exited my dev container because of fun things I'm going to be doing. On the screen, those are the list of the extensions that I've specifically said I want to be opened in my dev container. I have local extensions too. So like I said, there's like this overlapping layer of settings that you can do in one place versus another. So what I did is I went to the left-hand corner and I said, and I'm going to do it multiple times. This is me just switching through some profiles. Go to my profile default. Now I'm going to a linting one, whatever. So what part of my job as a product person is I'm tracking different user experiences one by one. So I just created 3 about linting. X on, X off, Y on, Y off. And so I'm tracking and trying to do the same activity over and over again in 3 different experiences. So it allowed me to isolate all of my features, and that's one way that I use profiles. But you can also use them. I think teachers use them a lot as well. Streamers use them a lot as well. Things like that. And they can do pretty colors. What's that, fun?
Yeah, for Codespaces, what the meter, what gets metered?
Time by time.
Just time.
Just time.
I can use all the space and all of the everything else.
Yep, 60 hours. That's what they told me.
Okay.
You shouldn't get any bills, and don't put your credit card in. Yeah, but
No,
yeah,
put your credit card in.
don't put a credit on it.
Always use an almost empty gift card.
Oh, actually, I know a friend who does that. Okay, so what we also went through here is, oh gosh, scrubbing is like terrible here. I don't want to start all the way over. So one of the things that we did here was we opened up there has to be a way to do this. Okay, that's scrubbing good. Okay, good. Over here. Okay, so what we did over here is we did a couple profiles, and then I created a profile. So you can create an empty profile or create it based on the one that you already have. And I said best profile ever. This is just a new one, and it's going to be exactly the same because I'm copying one. And this is me exporting the profile. So there is a special format that you can use that'll work fine with your next editor. So you can send a profile to a friend. It is .code profile, and it looks wonky on the inside. It's like condensed, minified, maybe JSON something. And then you can also do instead as GitHub, and it will open up a file somewhere else. And so then you can see this is an example of vscode.dev. This is not code spaces, although they look very similar because it is all VS Code in the web. And I said, yes, please accept all of the changes. I said I wanted to open in VS Code Insiders. I don't want to do that. I'm saying cancel, abort, abort, cancel. Let's actually import profile to this VS Code, and it changed colors. It is indicating it accepted all of the things. It did it.
So what's in the profile? It's like basically your settings, your colors?
Yeah, so it actually will show you all of the things. I wanted to say show contents. And so let me pause right here real quick. These are the contents. So can you see that good? Yes, we have settings.json. So those are like if you wanted to lint on save, that goes in settings.json. There's a whole bunch of things that you can put in there. And it's almost a disservice to try to summarize it. It's really best going to the documentation and just kind of experimenting with your favorite things. An easy kind of mind kind of grok is lint on save is one of those like things that you want to do. You also have all of the UI state, so I changed that so I can visually indicate that we were there, success, we won. You also have some of your extensions, and it specifically says which extensions you want to export and import. Cool. And so then I say I want to save it locally. This is my files. I don't really have any secrets. They don't give me the cool stuff. And now it's saved locally on my machine. I'm just going to open it up for you so you can see what the contents look like, because I am nosy and I like to know what like my files look like on the inside, even if I'm not going to be doing anything with myself. And so that's what it looks like. Cool. All right. Okay. Did I do the thing? I did it. I did this thing. We can zoom in through. I have no idea how long this took. So in a few clicks, you could switch from Docker to your local dev environment. I do have some friends who are just like very strictly only Docker containers. That's all they do. And then I have some friends who are like, no, I like to develop locally. That's a little bit overdone for me. In this way, y'all do not have to fight. You can code in peace with each other. You can share settings and work in progress. It's never been easier. Sorry for the marketing speak, but it really is doing like really cool things, and I'm sold. You can customize your user settings, workplace settings, and profile settings for your dev container. And there's a lot of extensions. And I mentioned the Python Pulse. We should do a drinking game for Python Pulse. Drink your water every time I say Python Pulse. It is every second Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. That AKMS short link is how you get the latest episode. I update it every month when I do. And then we had a really good episode with the VS Code team, the people who are actually maintaining VS Code extensions. They're really nice people. We're all smiling, and like we did not fake that, and it's not photoshopped. It's not AI, I swear. We're all smiling because we like each other, and we had a really entertaining stream. It's only about an hour, and in this section, I have a video link, and that's where it's cut to the moment that Karthik is describing the template, the Python LSP template, and if you want to create your own extensions. And those are the documentation for it. And these are extra slides. And this is marketing stuff. All right. Questions, comments, concerns?
I'm curious, in your experience, have you seen any particularly innovative use cases for using different types of profiles?
I don't know. We just we're sitting here building demos all the time, and so our use cases are really pretty boring. I got a little quiz app here. I got a little something here. I would imagine that it comes really helpful for teachers. Is mostly the people that I interact with when they have new students and they're like, I don't understand environments. Actually, that was not a blind spot. It was a area that I was not aware of beforehand. I was like, oh, new Pythonistas don't get environments? What do you mean? That's included in every tutorial. No, I'm a little bit too far away from the first days of Python, and I did not realize that contextualizing virtual environments is a huge obstacle. We've done a lot of studies on it, and this really kind of mitigates it, but also allows you the opportunity to peel back the layers and still see what it's doing and understand why. And then gets you acclimated with like a big resume booster. I work with Docker too. So I appreciate the way that we can kind of like get new learners into some of these really advanced technologies pretty quickly with a couple of buttons and a GUI. I don't know if I answered your questions, but teachers rock. So maybe teachers could be a good use case. But I'd love to hear from people. I hope I'm considered personable. I'd love to hear from people who use it in a cool way, and we can talk about it on the Python Pulse, or we could just stay friends. Can you give me a good use case? You said something, friend?
This is kind of a left field question.
Sure.
How does versioning work with collaborative code?
So it's committed. So it's going to all be within your version control. If you're using Git, which I recommend is what I use, it'll be all in there. Yeah. Not left field at all. What's up, friend?
With VS Code, because I've never used it.
Sure.
So it's just kind of a two-part question. The first is extensions.
Mm-hmm.
Can they be downloaded and loaded, like downloaded and then like installed locally if you're trying to work on a machine that's not on the internet?
It will work locally after it's installed, but if it's doing some type of like interaction with like it's pulling data, it will do some things like that. For example, there is a Copilot, right? Something like that. That's actively interacting.
What I mean is like if I want to. Can I go to the Marketplace website, download a package file, copy it somewhere, and then load it into VS Code?
I don't know. Good question. I don't know. We could like try it out if we had time. I could literally just try it out, but I don't know. You said a two-part question?
Oh, the second one was, do packages have dependencies?
Yes, they do. So, good question.
Extensions, I meant.
Yeah, extensions, and I got what you meant. So PyLance is our IntelliSense. JetBrains has this as well. It requires the Python extension, and it'll give you this little error form. You need to install Python first. So it will have some dependencies. It'll usually say that in the README, the first page, but there's also a lot of packages. Like I think people who I don't interact with every day are like paying attention to the user experience and the design of the marketplace and whether or not it's all packaged together. So they say, well, maybe you should recommend this thing up here at the top, big letters, do this. And so we try to make it easy for you.
Okay.
I saw another hand. Hi, Brian.
Hey Don, good to see you. Happy Thursday. Okay, so my question, how can you set up env variables like API keys in the container?
Cool. It's just a .env. I can show the thing too. Let me just open up my file. Can you see? You cannot see. That's good. You can. Oh, okay. Haha. It's just a .env, and so I had a .env here too because I started programming on this before I was using dev containers, and then when I created a Postgres. I used the drop-down menu, and I used it. I used a Postgres and Python 3, and it automatically gave me the setup for the dev container, my Docker Compose, my Docker file, and an env. And none of this is secret, so don't worry. I'm not giving you like the keys to the castle. But it only included these top ones. So then I used these two, but these are fake, so don't worry. Yeah, so it's right there.
So Don, do you have to set that in the actual Docker file then in the container? Like how do you have the envs without storing them in Git?
It's just in my git ignore, so it won't.
Oh, okay.
That's why I won't save it.
Okay, that's
and
cool.
so I just have it, and I don't have it in a particular folder. It's not like root.env git ignore. It's just all .envs.
Okay.
But it will spit it out a template, and then I have a template file here, so you know what it's supposed to set up and look like. Template.env is how my version of doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Question, friend.
Yeah, I was curious, you mentioned the big community of plugins available.
Yes.
How well can you trust them for the non-Microsoft created plugins? Are they vetted or reviewed in some way, so you know you're not like installing something malicious in the environment?
Yeah, I know that they are vetted for security, but I do not feel comfortable speaking to the level at which they are. And that's a really good question, but I know they are vetted for security, but some of them are kind of like garbage. So, like, at your own risk as well. And this is why we put the little logo there as well. But, yeah. Question, friend.
So whenever I'm working on a project and I'm changing my Python dependencies, normally it's as if I want to test out, it's as simple as remove the virtual environment, create a new virtual environment, pip install my new requirements file.
Yes.
You were doing a pip install inside of your post-creation script.
Yes.
Does that mean if you're changing dependencies, you're regularly destroying your entire container and rebuilding? Or are you like doing the package installs inside of your containers if you're changing dependencies?
You can do them inside your container when you're changing dependencies. You do not have to destroy it. You just shut it down, stop the container. It will still be there, and it is cached, so it will spin up faster the next time you use it. And each time you have a new container, it is isolated, so you will need to do that pip install flag R your requirements path. Yeah.
So kind of related question, does this do away with the need for Python virtual environment?
Yes, it could replace virtual environments. I'm flowing them out, but I mentioned bonus points. This is what, fourth time I said turducken. It could be a virtual environment inside a dev container. There's sometimes reasons for doing that. We talked about it the other day. Somebody's using Azure Functions and the tutorial requires a virtual environment because there's a path, blah, 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 blah. You can change your settings, your workplace settings, to look somewhere else and not for a virtual environment, but it works, and it totally works.
I'm trying to figure out if this question even makes sense.
We'll vet it.
Since the editor and everything ends up inside the container, could I push that container to a registry and then say, go pull this container and give somebody without having to pre-install something besides their Docker environment, just pull an image, spin up a container, and get the development environment? Or,
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And that's essentially what we're trying to provide for you. So when we do the image on in this devcontainer.json, so in this setup, I have it going to my Docker Compose. It is actually in my Docker Compose. Nope, actually it's in my Docker file. And then this is specifically a Microsoft Dev Containers image. So now we know that all of the other goodies will also be in this Docker image.
So like the VS Codeception.
Yes, yes, it is, yes. I can say Inception instead of turducken, yes. More questions, friends?
Yeah.
What's up, Brad?
Kind of related to his question, you mentioned that the editor is in the container. I didn't generally think of the container as having a GUI sort of interface. Like, isn't the editor on your local system and you open a container, or?
You are interacting with it in your editor in VS Code, right? So you are now using it. It is accessing. It says you go to VS Code and it says, give me all the things. And then because it's in VS Code, it gives you what you need in VS Code. I would not know how to extrapolate it and go to like some other isolated environment and say, okay, you've given me this image. Can I do all of the things that I would have done otherwise? Like there's steps to it. It's supposed to be all up in there, and then in the like vscode.dev, for example, it will open that up on in a browser. So it is VS Code travels with you everywhere that you use this, whether it is Codespaces, vscode.dev, or on your native desktop environment.
All right, we got to cut it there because
Sorry.
we're going to run out of time. But
Totally.
Dawn will give her email out. So while we're getting Paul set up, I guess we can do our raffle giveaway. Does everybody have a ticket? Is there anybody who came in late who didn't get a ticket?
We're doing something.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll grab a couple.
I love the mirror thing. Like,
Yeah. Okay. Thought I did.
Oh, thank you. Yes, when I was young and pretty.
I just thank you.
You're still young.
You just saw me with my long.
Yeah, that's the only reason. Right.
Hey, what's up?
It was like a hug.
Oh, I'm so excited. Yeah, I know. I'm like, wow, this is the perfect time.
People who just came to get
Oh, people who just came to get tickets, please put them back. These are the selection files. I have these.
Definitely won't win.
All right. Sorry about this.
I'm sorry. First base. Excellent job.
Yeah, they made it. Dude, when someone walked into the box, I bet that's the stuff. Also, I will say, how much it takes notes. Oh, it's awesome. Sorry. My son, yeah, it's like, I know. If I did ahead of time, I should have been like, yeah.
It's like
So we are already recording.
And I saw you were speaking.
As long as you set it to go to the external.
Talk about, we want to do that, and we want to go to the exchange.
And then we do that. But it's
You're both on the Philly. You're below.
Oh yeah.
All right, I'm going to do the ticket giveaway. It's good to meet you, by the way. Thanks for driving down.
No problem, no problem.
I'm glad we did it second. It gave you a little time.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
All right, who's ready for free stuff? So everybody, take a look at your tickets, and I'm just going to pick one at random for the first book, Fundamentals of Data Engineering. 119739. Hey, congratulations.
Wear it well.
All right. Next, shall we do a pair of socks? These are actually kind of nice. They've got the O's for O'Reilly on them, but not too much branding. My favorite ones are the Heroku socks, but these are pretty good. 119778.
Yeah.
Oh. There you go. All right, we'll do another Fundamentals of Data Engineering. 119761.
Oh, it's me.
All right. And another pair. Let's do one of Dane's books. You want to do the magical reading? You might be able to get him to autograph it for you.
It's not. This is for a copy of Practices of Python Pro, 119722.
Yes. Awesome. Do another pair of socks. 119726. 726? Awesome.
Yeah. I still have a variety.
And another Dane's books.
Sure, we'll do the other one. This is for publishing Python packages. 119751. Yeah.
Okay, now we're moving into the really, the fiction section, which is practical statistics for data scientists.
I really want this one.
119733 for this wonderful work of fiction. Oh, All right, let's do one more of Dane's. Thank you for bringing it by, Dane.
Yeah,
It's like Christmas here.
Practices of the Python Pro, 119765.
That's somebody who left?
Too bad he or she
This is basically like, this is the opposite of everything I do on a daily basis.
Another try, 119777.
All right, back to the wonderful world of fiction, practical statistics. 119755. Everybody won free pizza, right? Yeah. I'll have to get more next time. This is a much higher turnout percentage than my previous data sets have told me to expect. Thank you for being reliable to your word. 119727 for the last pair of socks. 727?
That's actually also me. Eric Levine's ticket.
Take those off.
All right. Do you have to be funny for this, or?
He doesn't have 4 feet though.
I don't know if I wrote down the official rules. All right, we'll do one more for 119735. 735. And last but not least,
was the ankle for this one?
for Dane's final book, he's written 2 because he's truly a masochist. Oh my God.
Oh, that's
Congratulations, Dane, you're just like... I've actually seen that happen once before. I jinxed myself when I said I did. 119747. Boeing 747. Are you out there? No.
All right.
All right. 119760. Hey! There are also DataPhilly stickers up here, so please feel free to grab a DataPhilly sticker if you'd like one. And congratulations, you are all winners, but some of you more so than others tonight. Are you all set to go?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Fantastic. Well, help me in welcoming Paul Chan. Thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I have a soft voice, so I usually carry this around. I'm really surprised to see that many people here today, but then I see the big piles of pizza boxes out there, so immediately I get the reason. So I know that right now everyone has their free stuff, so probably you guys want to leave as soon as possible. So I will try to control my basically my presentation within 20 minutes. Mainly, I'm not developer like everyone here. I would expect many of you are very, very high advanced developer than compared to me. I'm just someone that very interested in doing data and then doing a little bit of a machine learning algorithm. So that's why I got into this field. Maybe let me introduce a little bit about myself first. So I'm one of the organizer of DataPhilly, and DataPhilly is thank you. And DataPhilly is basically an organization based in the tri-state area, welcoming anyone that's interested in doing data. It's not just about like AI or machine learning stuff, but we also do a lot of stuff with like data visualizations. I've actually seen people doing data visualization with zooing kits. That's like an art to me. So those are really interesting stuff, things that we welcome. If you guys have anything that interesting, that welcome to let us know, and we can basically organize some kind of presentations like this. So other than an organizer, my academic background is really strange. I did my bachelor back in Hong Kong for biochemistry. Couldn't find a job. So I went in for a master in English, hoping that I could teach English. But then when I interviewed for a job, they told me that right now you're overqualified to be an English teacher. But strangely enough, I actually got into this field called functional safety. So functional safety is mainly about risk management. So what we do is that we go into usually an industrial application, like industrial plant, refineries, chemical plants, pharmaceutical plants, or even brewery. I've personally been to some hospital to do that. Basically, we try to analyze what are the current inherent risk within the whole operation, and then see whether there's any kind of gap that we can try to fill in. And then from that gap, we basically derive the specifications to do the design for the safety system. And that's how we go into using this risk parameters to design the safety system. And that's basically what I do. And whenever we do these kind of work, they are all bounded by IEC, ISO, ISA, or even ANSI standards. So there are different standards for different kind of application for risk analysis. And personally, I'm actually a committee member in something called, in one of the standards called ISA 18. This standard is really, really interesting because it is primarily dealing with alarms within an industrial plant. But because whenever we deal with alarm, we have a lot of data and configurations that is within these kind of applications like process controls. So therefore, that's how I got into data science. I need to do a lot of data cleaning, data wrangling, and that's basically why I need to use these kind of knowledge and information to go through and then try to optimize these kind of chemical plants. I can show you a little bit about what I do in relation to my work, which is very, very boring. But, basically what I do, especially when we're talking about alarm systems, this is one of the projects I did on data visualization for all the alarms within the like a refinery in Western PA. So we try to categorize them into different priority groups. So for different priorities, they have different priorities, how people within the operation room, they need to handle them. So that's why we have to review every attribute of the alarms, and in order to do that. Bless you. Basically, after the rationalization, we just go through and look at all the result, like how many priority groups are there, and then also look at what are the special types of alarm that are related to that priority group. For example, I did a word cloud here, showing that most of the alarms that are at a particular priorities, they have high alarm in their tag and stuff like that. And also, sometimes I do need to do the feature engineering to create new kind of data, which I basically label different priority groups with different numbers, and then do a summation of all the numbers together, and then showcase basically all the different units within the let me see, yeah, all the different units within the whole refinery, and then look at which of the units has the highest priority numbers. That means that they have some kind of problem because a lot of the risk are actually skewed towards those units. So if you guys are not bored and would like to know a little bit more, welcome to basically go to my website and have a look at this. And because these are very, very, I would say, not friendly to general public, so that's why today I'm actually going to focus on something that is going to trouble us at a certain point of our life about wages. So this is just like a fun project I did myself to work on basically looking at the wage of different, across different geography within the US. The data I use is primarily from the Department of Labor. So the Department of Labor do something called labor certifications, and there's a category is called permanent labor certification. So this particular category is that a kind of specific certifications the Department of Labor in the US do for those who want to apply for green card based on their employer's sponsorship. So and I would explain in detail why I would use this data to do the wage determination, because there's a lot of very good features within these data that actually makes it very, I would say, standardized data for the input of that particular model. So the main goal for today is, first of all, I would like to introduce the context, for example, why I use these data from the DOL, Department of Labor, and then also briefly talk about the features. And then I'm going to talk very briefly about just two features within the XGBoost, which is an ML algorithm. And I'm not going to talk about the code. I'm mainly going to talk about the math, actually the statistics behind the idea how this XGBoost algorithm works. And then I'm going to talk briefly about how the data cleaning process works, because data cleaning is actually the most time-consuming part whenever you work on data, actually. So that is actually the most, I would say, most daunting part whenever you try to do a data project, because most of the time the ML algorithm is within a package, so you don't really need to go in too deep within that particular package. And also I'm going to share you with the result, and also trying to basically look for suggestions from everyone to see how I can actually improve the result in the long term. So first of all, why do I want to use permanent labor certification data? So this particular certification is approved by the Department of Labor in the US based on several reasons. The first one is that they approve you based on something called prevailing wage. And this particular wage is actually wrote into the laws that can make sure that the government jobs or any kind of other jobs does not really undercut those local wage. So this wage is tied to the geographical locations where you're going to work. And in a way that this particular law is set up to basically make sure that, especially certain race won't be discriminated against, or certain group of ethnicity is not going to be discriminated against. But because the salary, when the Department of Labor, when they try to look at your application for the certification, they're actually going to compare that compare the salary that's offered to the foreigner who actually get a job in the US. So that particular salary of the foreigner is being audited against this particular prevailing wage. And the other thing within this system is that there's something called standard occupational classification system. So this particular system classifies each of the each of the jobs into different hierarchies and also specific classifications. For example, if it's like if you're working in the field of computer and mathematical occupations, they give you a code like 150000. And if it's like computer occupation, they add it up with 151200. And then if specifically it's about computer system analysts, they will give you specific code, 151211. So you can see this, everything is basically being standardized whenever whenever the process is going through for this particular certification data. Therefore, the data are really trustworthy when it comes to looking at wages. So that's why I use this to improve the standardizations and also the accuracy of the prediction. So there are a few features that I basically run into the model. So features means that the kind of information that goes into the model that directly derive the result of like the target wage in this case of that particular model. So the different features I went in with first is the SOC code, the classification code, because I just mentioned that the code is specifically tied to one particular profession. So in that case, that basically the algorithm is trying to determine your wage based on what you do, wage based on your profession. And then I'm also going to look into the skill level. That means that what exactly is the level, skill level of that particular candidate when they go through that particular certification program, and then that particular skill level is also going to determine your wage. The other thing that I go into, of course, would be the prevailing wage associated with that particular profession. And then there's also the worksite postal code. So basically where exactly you work, because where you work is going to affect your wage as well, in that sense. And the other thing is about your education. So I also use the education, the highest education degree, or whether that's like a degree, bachelor, master, or PhD that the foreigner has actually achieved. So use that as one of the feature and pass into the model, which is the XGBoost, and then we can go through and basically arrive at that particular salary estimation. So that is the basic flow in terms of how this model works. Now let's look at what exactly is XGBoost. So XGBoost, there are a lot of things that can actually go into XGBoost, like gradient boosting, regularization. So these are different features how the XGBoost can actually arrive on its in terms of how the algorithm works. A lot of the ideas here are actually related to statistics ideas, so that because a lot of the ML algorithm, there's basically a big statistic model. It's basically a big mathematical model in that sense. But because of the limited time, I'm only going to focus on only two parts today. One is the gradient boost. The other one is the regression tree. So XGBoost itself is very, very it's like an iterations. So it's trying to do a lot of iteration based on different decision trees. That is the main model, how it basically works. And that is actually why initially, back in the 80s and 90s, because resources in computer science is very, very limited. So people have to be very careful when they do the iterations, right? But then right now we have Moore's laws, and therefore there's like a big bloom in terms of the AI right now nowadays, because we basically can do all these things. We don't really need to care that much when compared to the 80s and 90s. To basically control the resource using our utilization within the code, that sense. So gradient boost is basically talking about that particular iterations. However, each time it's going to build a decision trees, it's going to put different weight into that particular decision tree. And then it's going to add all the decision trees together to basically derive that particular result. And whenever they generate one particular tree, they're going to look at what the error that they can actually create. And from that error, it's creating a new decision tree based on that. So in that sense, basically it's generating a lot of different decision trees based on a different kind of weight, learning rate in terms of that, to basically arrive at that particular, I would say, result in that sense. And there is another concept whenever we talk about machine learning, one is about, those two concepts are kind of linked together. One is variance, and also the other one is bias. Bias is mainly focusing on whether the model is creating any kind of error. But the variance is actually talking about whether you have some kind of overfitting problems. So whenever we talk about statistics, unfortunately, we have to retouch on that. So statistics, we always, whenever we collect a lot of data, we are not really going to collect all the data that's going to simulate the reality in that sense. What we can do is try our best to to basically collect as most data as we can. But that particular data sample, number of data, is not going to basically represent the whole population data. So there is always like a little bit of a disagreement between those two. And therefore, whenever we use the data to train an ML model, we can make that training data, that particular model, fit into that training data very, very well. But that doesn't mean that it's going to predict a new value based on new data very well, because you are not using the population data to train it. You're using just a sample of data to train it. And that is the concept of variance. And gradient boost reduce variance by basically introducing some kind of portions, like a learning rate in this case, to basically reduce that situation. And so that is the main gist about gradient boost. The other one is about regression. So as I've told you that XGBoost is basically a tree model. It can actually do both regression or regression model, or you can even do classification model. So regression model is mainly looking at like a linear regression, and then you plot line in a way that you can basically predict new value from that particular plot line in that sense. So so therefore, by looking at these kind of decision trees, so each decision tree has different leaves, and then at the very end, you go through different decisions at these kind of branches, and then you will basically arrive at different decisions at the very bottom. And as you can see, there are different decisions out there. So these decisions are being like for example here, when we look at the postal code, it says less than 730. These kind of numbers out there are actually being automatically generated by the program. You don't really need to actually control these kind of numbers out there. And this is called a threshold, in a way that is basically being calculated from the previous branch, which in a way that we have something called a similarity score. Then similarity score is basically comparing between the different values between different leaves, and then you basically do some math on that, and then you can generate that particular gain out of that. So I don't want to go into too much detail, because I do understand that we are limited, have a limited time on that, and if we want to go into that, it can take me like 2 to 3 hours to actually explain that. So that is the main, I would say, the main gist about XGBoost in terms of the very high level view on how XGBoost work. And in fact, you don't even, whenever you use this particular model, you don't even need to understand them a lot of the time. And that's why, unless you actually want to be an ML engineer, then you have to do that. But for most data scientists, they just use the model. They don't really care too much about how the math goes into that. Which I do find that a little bit disturbing, but in a way, that I do understand that not everyone is fascinated by the stats in a way, I guess. So the next part that I'd like to likely touch on is about data cleaning and wrangling. A lot of the data cleaning work would basically be like filtering stuff, like what kind of input feature that you want, what kind of outliers you want to exclude, and also trying to remove maybe some kind of format errors, especially if you're dealing with text, that you might have extra spaces or extra symbols, so you want to remove those remove those kind of extra symbols, extra characters from your data in order to run into the features. the other thing that I do is what we call feature engineering, creating new kind of feature to actually to pass into the model. For example, some of the data that I have on the wage, they only provide me a range. So I just very brutally use the midpoint of that as one of the input feature for the model. And also the other concept that we usually use for especially for the feature engineering is about encoding. So computers, especially when it comes to regression models, they don't understand text. To them, text is just a code. So therefore, we need to convert them into math, convert them into numbers so that they can pass into the statistical model, to the formula, so that they can go through that particular mathematics to arrive in the result. So encoding here is basically looking at different kind of categories and then convert them into numbers. In this particular case, what I did is, for example, if we're talking about education level, if it's a bachelor, then I just convert that bachelor into number 2. If it's like PhD, I'll convert that into maybe number 4 in that sense. So it's a very simple idea. Basically, convert that into numbers so that it can be passed into the mathematics. So the result of this prediction model is actually not that good, I have to say. So I believe there is a bias issue. So the problem is that when you look at the error, it can be up to 12,000. 12,000. So considering that when you try to predict a wage and then you're paid off about, there's a difference of 12,000. I don't know how you would feel about that. Yes. So I did try to use different validations to see whether do the k-fold validation to pass different part of the data into the model to basically see if there's any changes to that particular error. But they all give me this within the same range, as you can see from the graph over there. Around this particular range, around 12 or up to like 13,000 in that sense. So that means that to me, in a way, that it doesn't really have that variance issue. It's rather like a bias issue. But maybe you guys can give me some insight on that. So the reason for that is I speculate is that because that although I passed like 90K of rows of data into this learning model, we have really limited types of job types. For example, if we look at the data for data scientists, we only have about 7 data over there. And they are also in very strange. They are not really kind of outspread in terms of all the geographical locations in the US either. Some of them are in Delaware, some of them in Texas, and even in New York. They're not in New York City, but they're in Albany. So if I pass something like this into the model, asking it to predict a wage for me, for example, I'm looking for a salary of a data scientist who is living in Hell's Kitchen in New York, then with a bachelor degree, then it can give me a data like about 115K in that sense. But because we don't even have a data scientist that's living in Hell's Kitchen in New York, so therefore that data is actually being predicted based on other factors. It's not really based on that particular work. Your work locations, it has some kind of I would say a certain degree of accuracy there, because if you look at real data out there, it's not that it can be a little bit far away, but not that crazy like 50K off like that. But so it's basically mainly using data in a way that it predicts based on your job type, your job level, and also based on your education level. based in that sense. However, that's not what I want to do. I want to have much more accurate result in that sense. So therefore, what are the few improvements that I personally want to do is basically also adding more data into this data set by adding not just green card data, but also like other kind of working visa data like H-1B certification data. But there's some problem with that data because I believe it doesn't really have a strong relationship with the prevailing wage. So that's going to have some problems. So I do need to do some more data cleaning in a way that to basically generalize the two features together in that sense. And there are also, I've got feedback from other people saying that maybe you should also try regularization, which is basically in a way to reduce overfitting. But based on what I understand, it doesn't seem to be my problem, but I still try to see if that actually works. And there's also other things that I don't even know that much when it comes to XGBoost, like lambda and subsampling. There's people suggested that, but I'm too busy to basically look into that particular concept and see how that works. So I guess there should be a lot of questions. But I have to say that I'm also here just mainly to learn from everyone, and hopefully you guys can actually also give me some suggestions. Yes, please.
Yeah, so thank you so much for the presentation. I have one question and then one thing that might be a potential improvement. So first, I was actually curious about going back to XGBoost. So obviously, it's a tree-based algorithm, but I was curious how it differs from, say, if you're doing a random forest. Is it because it's iterative as opposed to doing branches concurrently? You know, random forest, you basically have 10 different models all running at once. You try and like aggregate the best results from all of them. What's the practical difference that you do?
So the practical difference, yes, is about the iteration. So each of the new tree is basically based on the old tree. Okay. So it's based on the errors from the old tree that's going to generate a new tree.
Got it.
That is the main difference between random forest and XGBoost.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to mention the other
yes.
So I was thinking about obviously regularization and normalization are highly related, but the one thing I feel like you probably are running into a bias issue regardless, like you're right about that. But I was thinking that you might get a little closer if you did normalization, probably, just because I was thinking about the effect sizes of using something as big as wage. The coefficient term is going to be huge, and it'll just outsize something that has such a small, I don't know, I was just thinking about, like, relatively speaking, if you scaled wages down, it might, like, that's probably 90% of your model is going towards those wages. That's just a supposition. I haven't really gone into it, but.
I see. I think
related to his point.
Okay.
So I actually have kind of run into like the same kind of mean absolute error, and we got some crazy numbers when we were trying to work with the data set that was real estate pricing in Philadelphia and New York City. So because of the large range of values, when we had to normalize the errors just for them to actually make sense to us. So I could say if it really just depends, maybe it could be just applying like a robust scalar or something like that just to, make it a little more normalized, and I do think that could really improve it.
Great, thank you. Yes, yes, that gentleman.
So this is on non-US citizens, right?
Non-US citizens.
I'm sorry?
Non-US citizen.
Okay. What's the prevailing wage based on? I mean, one of them is the postal code, but what if you're a remote person?
So the prevailing wage is actually based on the local geographic data. It's based on US citizens.
But my company who pays me a check is in Iowa. It's my Philadelphia. That's my zip code, right? I'm getting a Philadelphia wage, not an Iowa wage. Meaning I'm getting higher wage than if I worked in Iowa.
Where you pay taxes, the DLO's on taxes.
Great. Is that okay?
Sorry.
And the other one is there ever a case on the SOC that, you say a computer scientist, the other guy says I'm a mathematician, and they conflict?
No, usually they.
What's the SOC, meaning what's your classification? You're 1.5, whatever those numbers are, 1.2.
Yes. So let me go back to
that. Are they really disjointed?
So it's basically
obvious to, when someone says, what do you do? And it's like, oh, you're obviously a 15121.
So these are for people with green cards, right? So probably the company is sponsoring that and defines that, maybe? I don't know.
It's the Department of Labor is going to go into your, basically they need to do reviews and interviews with the company and actually determine what exactly your categories of job is. So that's my understanding of it.
Category will have the lowest wages or like the prevailing wages that they need to. So that they need to decide which categories.
Right.
Yeah.
But who decides? I mean, you answered that, yeah.
So my understanding is that because whenever you go into to basically hand in applications, the Department of Labor needs to decide that. So it's the Department of Labor decide that. It's not something that basically the employer says, oh, this is that. But after they did the audit and they did the review, they may arrive with a different classification, and they can override that particular decision. At least that's my understanding of it.
So you feel that you have a severe imbalance of your data, right? You have like one person in Hell's Kitchen who's working in computer math, right? Or maybe none, but it's predicting based on your zip code, where you get your taxes, right? I mean, you may not have any representative person in your data set that actually is in a zip code of Hell's Kitchen.
Yes, exactly. That's the work. That's the work location. That's what I'm.
I know. As soon as you said Hell's Kitchen, it's like, is there a tech person in there? I don't know. Maybe, thanks.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
How did you choose XGBoost as your framework?
Mainly I was looking at different, because first of all, it's very, very famous in that sense. And then the other thing is that I know that it has both a regression and also classification. So I want to, because I built this for fun, I would say. So that's the main reason in a way that I feel like if it's that versatile, I should give it a try. And because I do know that it tends to have better accuracy than random forest and also simple decision trees like that. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Yes, looks like you're using postal code as a feature, right? So it looks like, at least in your example, that your model is learning like, if postal code is less than 097, then. But really, postal code is a proxy for cost of living. I mean, that's really the idea, right? So did you ever think of actually grabbing the cost of living from where these people are working and using that instead of postal code? Because you might have two postal codes that are 097 and 098, but really the cost of living in 098 is almost 1.5 times the other one.
I see.
So instead of postal code, cost of living might be a better feature there.
I see. Great.
And that data is probably publicly available.
Okay, I'll give it a check. Thank you.
Yeah.
And link them together. Yes, please.
Yeah, I actually wanted to follow up on the geography remark there. So are you including both, you're including work site and residential location?
No, I'm only including the work site.
Oh, so the Hell's Kitchen example wasn't someone living in Hell's Kitchen, it's someone working in Hell's Kitchen?
Yes.
Okay. I think probably if you think about the way economists look at labor markets and industrial agglomerations, you're going to have very, very similar wages within an industry in a metropolitan area. So the very specific postal code geography is both. You mentioned creating a problem in terms of too many buckets. So
Yes.
you don't actually have anyone in that postal code. You might back out to a larger geography like a county or a metropolitan area and see how it works.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I was going to add on to that, breaking it out into metropolitan area and then using the geography, you could calculate something like a distance from metropolitan center, and that could probably create much nicer buckets.
Okay. Great. Yes, I think the gentleman back is first.
I just had a quick question about skill level. Is skill level directly related to years of experience in the specific SOC job that they have?
The skill level is actually linked also yeah, that is part of that. It's about working experiences, but also it has something linked to the prevailing wage as well, in terms of how that, in a way that I think it's kind of also linked to the geography in that sense, because it's linked to the prevailing wage.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you use any of the employer information as a feature?
So these are actually employers. I do need to.
In terms of wages, some employers are known to pay higher wages than others.
Yes.
In addition to the type of employer.
Oh, I see.
A lot of times when companies want to cut costs, they subcontract out.
I see.
So you could have somebody working at a company doing the same job as a subcontractor may be making less or more than that.
I see.
And that's usually a big difference.
I see. Interesting. Yes.
So,
yeah,
cleaning this building, if they're an employee of Wharton, they may make a little better benefits and wages than if they're working for some cleaning service.
I see. Interesting. I need to find a way to determine that within a data set. It's basically it does list the employer there, but yeah, I don't know whether it's like subcontract or anything. I need to see whether there's something there I can determine that. Yes. Yes, please.
So I have a question and a suggestion. The quick suggestion is similar to having a lot of postal codes, such that there are places that are close together that should have similar wages. And the same thing should be true with SOC codes as well. If you're using the 6-digit code, then you're not going to have very many people in any given classification, but you might have a lot at the 2-level code. So you could include the higher level codes as well, because you would guess that people in the tech sector would have similar wages regardless of like what their specific occupation is.
I see.
And then the question is just, can you talk through what made you want to do this and what you could see the use case for this being in terms of trying to predict wages with this, with these features?
So this is mainly like a fun project for me, and I'm an immigrant myself, so I always feel like how maybe, and I went through the whole green card process myself, so I know how I would say how standardized the process is. I'm thinking that maybe using data from that is as a more authoritative way to look at it, to more standardized data in general in that sense. So that's why I adopt that data to try to basically do some fun thing to use XGBoost for. So that is the main reason. It's not something that I will sell something on. Yeah.
Just to note, we have time for one or two more questions, but we have to be out of here by about 8:15 so they can clean up for the tomorrow. But we can take one or two more.
Just curious, if you looked at state DOL data.
I'm sorry?
Have you augmented your data with any of the state DOLs? Yeah, each state has the same data.
The data is directly from DOLs.
From each state?
Each
state?
Each state.
Pennsylvania has a Department of Labor, they have one set of rates and data. New Jersey has a separate one. They're all published, and state by state. And some of them actually have a lot more granularity in what they report than.
Oh, I see.
The federal, you can either reinforce the data or.
Yes, I will look into that. But the reason this is because the whole permanent certification process is they don't divide them by states. They do everything together. That's why this is that.
When you take statistics and you put everything together.
Yes. Yeah, it's a good idea that I would look into different states and then see if I can basically build more features into the data set. Yes. Yeah, please go ahead.
So about the degree part, I'm curious that I think you say that like bachelor's 1, like master 2 or something like that. Do you think about like one-time coding or something?
I'm sorry, one.
One coding, like just like is bachelor and you get one, and it's not it's zero, something like that.
Oh, in that sense,
I
okay.
think it probably like if you say that bachelor 1, master 2, like doctor 3, something is you say like like PhD is like higher than the bachelor or something.
Yes, yes, I do that. Yes.
It maybe could create bias, I think so. I don't know. So maybe just maybe like a one-point coding.
One-point coding.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try that. I'll try that out.
Yeah.
Do we still have time?
Probably take one more.
Yeah. Okay.
This is a splitting algorithm, so it's not like regression where you're going to multiply a beta times a 1 and a beta times a 2. It's saying, I've got 1, 2, and 3, which gets me the most purity in my answer. So if I could pick 1 versus 2 and 3, or 1 and 2 versus 3. So it really doesn't matter. You wouldn't get any benefit from making like a 1.2. The algorithm takes care of that.
Okay, I see. Great, thank you.
Did we have one more over here?
Yeah,
back here.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So you mentioned you didn't like the error. What error would you like to get to? And what would your thinking be about why that would be a good number?
It's I just feel like because I did try the real estate as some of you mentioned using looking at real estate data and but when it comes to those real estate I would say total prices for those places usually can get even up to 1 million. But when it comes to annual salaries, usually it's in the range of about 100,000 or maybe even less. So when you have like about 10% of that, to me it's a little bit high. That's why I feel like it's high in that sense. I'm actually be open-minded in terms of I still want to do a little more in terms of like a trial and error and then see how low can I get to basically before I just want to say before I go and may not be that bad. Okay. I see. Oh yes.
Did you do a grid search?
I don't think so.
Tune the parameters? That would be a traditional way of trying to improve your score. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, thank you very much.
I know we had one more hand over here that had been up for a while. Did you have your hand up for a bit? Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did for a moment. Just one other thing I wanted to suggest. I know in some research, rather than sort of trying to categorize education into these like discrete buckets of like a bachelor's or whatever, like is a PhD just 2 more than like a bachelor's degree or whatever? A more common thing that I've seen, at least in like social sciences research, is to focus on years of education. In this case, you can't ask the people directly, like, how many years of education, because some people's PhDs take a really long time and some people do them quickly. But, on average, typically you consider, like, what is it? I think 16 for a bachelor's degree, 18 for a master's, some other number for a PhD, and that might maybe give you a little bit more scaling in that, because there's just to give sort of more depth to what kind of a difference you're talking about when you're talking about bachelor's versus PhD.
And you're talking about the total years of education from elementary school? Or
in some of the research I've seen, that's usually how they do it, but that's also coming from a perspective where I imagine this data is generally just looking at like bachelor's degree and higher. Those are usually, I would imagine, people that are applying for visas working here, or for permanent citizenship on the basis of work. And those are so for your use case, you might want to look at it a little differently, like post, like secondary education instead, a number of years like that. If you're not going to be looking at people who like didn't finish 8th grade, for instance, you might not need that level of granularity.
I see. Great, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, thank you very much.
We'll be back again next month. Again, I encourage anybody who wants to, anybody who has ideas for talks, please get in touch with me. Thanks everyone for for coming out. This is awesome. Thank you.